Lords of the Fallen is an okay Souls-like game, but is it a good co-op experience? There's a distinct lack of good co-op games nowadays, and for me, that's really sad to see. I miss the days of couch co-op game time with friends, just relaxing, playing a game that's not some competitive multiplayer game where I have to sweat and clench my cheeks the whole time. Single player games exist, but it's just not the same as having a nice game that you can hop on and just vibe with a friend through some sort of journey that's not match to match. I know most people try to take the Souls-like games and say they're only meant to be played solo. You're not playing it right if you're not solo. Why complain about co-op? It's there, be happy. Lords of the Fallen was a bit different because it was promoting the co-op aspect quite a bit, and I feel I've paid my dues with running Souls-like games solo. Now I just want to have fun. I've played a lot of other Souls-like games that have come out in their very limited definition of co-op, but there aren't really any that are truly seamless, at least not that I've played. So with Lords of the Fallen coming out and showing off co-op as a pretty major feature, you could say I was just a little bit excited. Well, is it a good co-op game? Is it truly seamless? Yes and no. Let's talk about it. If you enjoy the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified of future uploads. I'm not going to really review Lords of the Fallen as a whole. There are plenty of other people that have done that, and you probably know if Souls-like games are up your alley or not. This is primarily about how it feels to load in with a friend and take this game on. From the jump, you're going to make your character and do the tutorial alone. This is fine, helps you understand the game mechanics, and gets you used to how the game is going to play. As soon as you reach the first vestige, which for all intents and purposes is a bonfire, you can summon your friend into the game. This is before the tutorial boss, and I thought that was really cool. So, how does the multiplayer work? Well, it's really simple. Unlike other Souls-like games that implement cooperative features, Lords of the Fallen doesn't require specific items for summoning. When you're at a vestige, you just click multiplayer, go through your friends, and invite who you want to invite. I love this, it's really smooth, and there were really no issues we ran into with it. Then you can just play the game all the way through with some small or major caveats depending on your own tastes. When you're playing Lords of the Fallen, co-op partners can level up at vestiges, upgrade equipment, purchase items at vendors, most of the things you need to do to make sure you're staying up to date. There's no need to travel back to your own world yet. The only thing the invited person can't do in this regard is talk to NPCs and get dialogue from them. For me, this is fine. It ensures that quests can't be messed up, only the host has the power to hand over items and progress with side quests, and that's cool with me. The co-op partner also can't fast travel, but that's a good thing. It'd probably have some awkward or frustrating moments if they could. Items that are dropped from enemies and boss drops can be obtained by the co-op partner. However, chests and other lootable world items cannot be grabbed. This is a big weird for me. If everything else is so seamless, I'm not entirely sure why they can't pick up these items too. The biggest problem that arises from this is a double-edged sword. Most of the weapon upgrade materials are found around the world. So if your friend wants to upgrade their weapon and be able to do a reasonable amount of damage or upgrade their healing item, you're going to need to go back and play through the game a second time to keep up with your playthrough. It's not as seamless as it seems on the cover. It's seamless in a very technical sense. You never have to go back and do it over again, but are you going to want to? Probably. The reason I say it's a double-edged sword is because it does keep the difficulty a bit higher if you choose not to go back and run through your friend's world, and I know that's a good thing for some Souls-like fans. But I expect most people playing with friends want more of just a fun time, going through a weird world together and exploring, so this might be an issue for you if you just want to play it once without too much grinding. We played about 1.5 playthroughs, just enough to get a decent bit of an upgrade for my friend's weapon. Also, the co-op partner only receives half XP from taking out mobs and bosses, so they're going to fall behind a bit, but not so much that it's entirely necessary to farm, but it's a bit of an inconvenience to see your friend be always a bit of a step ahead. Going into Umbrell is another thing that only the host of the world can do. It's an extremely integral part of Lords of the Fallen, but one that I think is justified being in the hands of only one person. The same goes for getting out of it. I could just see the game getting really messy and awkward if both players had access to this feature, so it's okay in my book. The one part I don't like about this is that most of the stuff in Umbrell you can interact with fine. The co-op partners can interact with stuff and move around the Umbrell relatively easily, but they can't open up little item pouches despite seeing them or do anything like that to help you out. It's these little inconsistencies in co-op that just make me scratch my head a bit. The same goes for shortcuts and the like. Only the host can drop shortcuts. Boss doors using keys raising up seedlings to use as vestige points is totally okay being in the hands of only the host. but I don't know why the shortcuts are a no-go. There are plenty of levers in the game that can be used by both players, but some are unique and can't. Inconsistency is a theme in Lords of the Fallen co-op. The actual combat feels pretty decent when you're in the world with your friend. Taking on mobs and clearing out areas can be a really good time when you're not being overwhelmed by the hordes in Umbrell. Each player usually winds up with a group of enemies on them and has to play like you'd expect playing a game like this solo, and it works pretty well. It's fun, and even more fun when you can find bigger enemies to bully with the lamp. The areas were pretty challenging, even in co-op. It's very easy to get overwhelmed, especially in Umbrell, and it's a welcome challenge. The only problem showed up around the halfway point. It just became a lot of enemy spam, and it wasn't even new enemies. The variety is pretty lackluster, so we found ourselves just running through areas to avoid fighting the same mini-boss mob for the 30th time. It's the same problem we ran into with Wolong. The bosses, which are my favorite part about most games in general aside from movement, are pretty poop in Lords of the Fallen co-op. In most other Souls-like games, the bosses will split aggro. When one player does enough damage to a boss, they'll switch to target the player dishing out the damage, and it becomes a back and forth. If you're playing strategically, this means one player dodges and gets a hit or two in, like a normal fight solo, and the other deals extra damage from behind until they take the aggro. In Lords of the Fallen, most of the bosses just stick to one person the entire time. This means one person is dodging the whole fight, the other is smacking a training dummy on wheels that keeps running away. It just didn't feel good to take on most of the bosses, and this issue lingered throughout the entire game. They would even get stuck on my buddy's corpse and attack it endlessly so I could easily take them out. Stinky AI. It was weird because there were a few bosses that didn't have this problem, and those bosses were pretty fun, so I don't know what's up with the rest. I think this game maybe just needed some more time to cook if they wanted to do and advertise the co-op the way that they did. Dying in co-op is something that not everyone will like, but I happen to enjoy in Lords of the Fallen. If the host dies, like in solo, you'll get a second chance in Umbrell. If you die again, it sends you back to the Vestige, even if the co-op partner is still alive. If the co-op partner dies, they don't come back in Umbrell, but they can be revived with your heal thingy. Saintly quintessence is a word I could barely get out during the playthrough. You can revive as many times as you have heal items, so that's a really cool feature in my book, because you have to decide if you'd rather heal yourself or res your teammate. If the co-op partner dies, they get to spectate the host until they're rezzed, or the host dies or rests at a vestige point. My nitpick would be that I think allowing the host to spectate the co-op partner, but not being able to be rezzed would be a cool feature. It kind of stinks if the co-op partner's on a roll, but the host dies and you just get booted out, but it's fine, I still like the system overall. Lords of the Fallen isn't exactly the level of seamless you'd expect when you hear the word seamless, but it still manages to be a pretty smooth and decent time as a co-op experience. I didn't really enjoy the game as a whole, it wasn't my style, but my friend did enjoy the game despite having some complaints. I'm glad it was so easy to do the co-op because I don't know if I could have played through this one alone, it just didn't feel that great to me. Is Lords of the Fallen a good co-op game to play with your friends? Maybe. If the stuff I mentioned doesn't bother you, then you'll probably have a decent time. If you're not a fan of Souls-likes, definitely not. If you're expecting the best co-op Souls-like experience, I still think mods for other games do it better and are better games overall. It's not a terrible game by any means, but right after Lies of P, Lords of the Fallen just fell flat for me, even with co-op. It feels wonky and not entirely done, but that's up to you to decide. I just wanted to give my thoughts on co-op because, again, I think we're starved for good co-op games, and I was really hoping Lords of the Fallen would be it. It's passable, but still not entirely what I'm looking for, both in co-op and generally as a Souls-like game. Well, let me know what you all think. Did you like co-op in Lords of the Fallen?